you've done it again. You're standing right in front of someone you've met before, maybe 3 times, maybe more, and their name is just gone, not stuck on the tip of your tongue, not hiding somewhere you can reach if you try hard enough, just completely absent, like it was never stored in the first place. And in that exact moment, your brain doesn't panic loudly. It shifts into survival mode. You smile, you nod, you stretch out the conversation just enough, secretly hoping something saves you. Maybe someone else says their name. Maybe they introduce themselves again. Maybe anything happens to get you out of this quiet, invisible trap. And those next few seconds, they feel longer than they should, like you're performing a role you didn't rehearse for. But here's the part no one tells you, Walk, and it matters more than you think. This isn't happening because you're careless. It's not because you don't respect people, and it definitely isn't because you're not smart enough to remember something so simple. There is a very specific reason your brain does this, a pattern, a mechanism, something deeper than just bad memory. And once you see it, really see it, the guilt you've been carrying around this tiny moment starts to loosen, because forgetting names isn't random. It's not a flaw in who you are. It's a clue, a signal about how your mind actually works when it's under pressure, when it's trying to navigate people, impressions, and expectations all at once. So before you judge yourself again the next time it happens, just pause for a second and ask yourself this: what if the problem was never your memory, but where your attention was in that exact moment? When you meet someone new, it feels simple on the surface. A handshake, a smile, a quick exchange of names. But underneath that moment, your brain is doing something far more complex than you realize. It's scanning their face, reading micro-expressions, analyzing their tone, trying to figure out who they are, what they think of you, and where you stand in that interaction. At the same time, you're running an internal script. What should I say next? Am I coming across okay? Did that sound natural? Should I joke or stay serious? Your attention is split in 6 different directions, all competing at once. And right in the middle of that cognitive traffic, they say their name, just a single word, a sound you've never heard attached to this person before. It doesn't connect to anything you already know. It doesn't trigger an image, a memory, or a feeling. It just lands. And because your brain is already overloaded, it doesn't get processed. It gets skipped. That's the part most people misunderstand. They think forgetting a name means they weren't paying attention. But the truth is, you were paying attention, just not to the name. You were paying attention to everything else that felt more important in that moment. The way they looked at you, the energy of the conversation, the pressure to respond correctly. Your brain made a split-second decision about what mattered most for social survival, and the name didn't make the cut. And here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. For a lot of people, especially those who are highly self-aware or slightly anxious in social situations, that internal dialogue never really turns off. While the other person is talking, you're still editing yourself in real time, still preparing what to say next, still adjusting how you come across. So even when you hear the name, you don't actually receive it. It passes through a mind that is already occupied. This is why it happens over and over again. Not because you don't care, not because you're forgetful by nature, but because in that critical moment, when the name is given, you're not fully there. You're slightly ahead of the moment, already thinking about what comes next. And that tiny shift is enough to erase something as fragile. Now here's where it gets deeper and a little more uncomfortable. Because this isn't just about distraction or overload. It's about how your brain decides what is worth keeping in the first place. Your memory is not a neutral system. It doesn't store everything equally. It's selective, ruthlessly selective. and it favors meaning over information, emotion over labels, connection over randomness. So when someone tells you their name, your brain runs a silent check. Does this connect to anything I already know? Most of the time, the answer is no. A name, by itself, is just a sound. It doesn't carry an image. It doesn't trigger a memory. It doesn't link to a feeling. It just floats there, isolated, with nothing to attach to. And your brain hates isolated data. It's designed to build networks, not store loose fragments. That's why there's a strange paradox. You can remember what someone does, but not what they're called. Tell your brain someone is a baker, and suddenly it lights up bread. Early mornings, warmth, routine. It creates a web instantly. But tell your brain their name is Baker? Nothing. No anchors, no associations, just a word with no roots. And rootless things don't last. So it fades, not because you weren't paying attention, but because your brain didn't see a reason to keep it. And this explains something most people don't realize about themselves. If you're someone who easily forgets names, there's a high chance your memory doesn't work in labels sought, works in experiences. You remember how someone made you feel, the exact tone they used when they said something important, the way their face shifted when they laughed, the small, almost invisible details that most people miss. Your memory is textured, layered, contextual. You don't store people as files, you store them as moments, which is why you can walk away from a conversation remembering the entire emotional landscape, but still blank on the name. And here's the part that flips everything. That's not a weakness. That's a different kind of intelligence. Because while some people are good at remembering labels, you are tuned in to meaning. While others remember names, you remember essence. And in real human connection, essence always matters more. But because the world places so much social value on names, you've been conditioned to see this as a flaw, something to fix, something to be embarrassed about, when in reality, it's just a mismatch between how your brain works and what the situation demands. So if you're starting to see yourself in this, not as someone who is forgetful, but as someone whose brain prioritizes differently, then say I in your head, because this isn't abstract anymore. This is about you. Picture this, you're at a small gathering, not too loud, not too crowded, just enough people to keep conversations moving. You meet someone new. You shake hands, they smile, say their name. You repeat it quickly, just to be polite. And then the conversation starts flowing, and for the next 10 minutes, you're completely there. You're listening. You're asking questions. You're picking up on the little things. They mention their sister. You remember that. They tell a story about a trip. The way they describe it sticks with you. You notice the way their expression changes when they talk about something that matters. You even remember a specific sentence they said that felt unusually honest. And when the conversation ends, you walk away with a clear impression. You liked them. Or maybe you didn't. But either way, something about them stayed with you. Now fast forward 20 minutes. You see them again across the room. They look familiar. Very familiar. You remember the story. You remember the feeling. You remember exactly where you were standing when they said that one thing. But then it hits you. The name. It's gone. Completely gone. And suddenly, all that rich memory, everything you actually absorbed about them, feels useless. Because the one thing you're supposed to remember is the one thing you don't have. So what do? You hesitate for a split second. Do you go over and say hi? Do you avoid them until you hear someone else say their name? Do you gamble and hope it comes back mid-sentence? That moment right there, that quiet hesitation-ness, where most people judge themselves. How could I forget something so basic? But here's the question no one asks. What did you actually remember instead? Because if you look closely, you didn't forget the person. You remembered the experience of them. And that's a completely different kind of memory. There are people who can meet 10 new individuals in one night and recall every single name perfectly. But ask them what those people said, what they cared about, what stood out, and there's nothing there, just names attached to empty impressions. And then there are people like you. You might forget the label, but you remember the substance. You remember the moment something felt real. You remember the emotional tone, the subtle cues, the parts that aren't spoken out loud. Your brain wasn't idle. It was busy recording something deeper. But the world doesn't reward that kind of memory in the moment. Social rules are simple. Remember the name, or it looks like you didn't care. So you end up in this strange position where you can recall who someone is without being able to call them anything. And that creates friction, not because you failed, but because the system you're in values a different kind of recall than the one you naturally use. Now imagine this scenario from the other side. Someone forgets your name. Instantly, there's a small sting. You feel it, even if you don't show it, because your brain translates that moment into something personal. I didn't matter enough. That's the automatic interpretation. But what you don't see is everything else they might remember about you. The thing you said that stuck, the way you made them feel, the detail you didn't even realize was noticeable. They were present with you, just not in the way that stores names. And that's the disconnect. One person values the label, the other values the experience, and both walk away misunderstanding what just happened. So if you were in that room, seeing that person again, caught in that split second of hesitation, what would you do? Would you stay silent, protect yourself, avoid the awkwardness, or would you step forward anyway, risking that small moment of exposure, just to reconnect? If it were you, choose 1, if you'd stay quiet, or 2, if you'd go back in anyway. Here's the twist that most people resist at first, because it challenges something deeply ingrained. You've been taught, directly or indirectly, that remembering names equals caring, that it's a basic form of respect, and if you fail at it, even occasionally, it must mean you weren't paying enough attention, or worse, that you didn't value the person enough. But that assumption, it's flawed. Not completely wrong, but incomplete in a way that distorts how you see yourself. Because remembering a name is not the same as remembering a person. It's just the most visible proof of memory in social situations. It's a label, a tag, a shortcut that makes interactions smoother. But it's also the most superficial layer of what someone actually is. And your brain knows that, even if you've never consciously said it out loud. Your brain is constantly making decisions about what matters, and it does that without asking for your permission. It filters, compresses, prioritizes. It looks for emotional weight, for patterns, for meaning, not for arbitrary sounds that don't connect to anything. So when you forget a name but remember everything else, the tone, the energy, the story, that's not a failure of memory. That's a reflection of what your mind considers valuable. And here's where it flips. The people who struggle the most with names are often the same people who are highly attuned to nuance. They pick up on subtle shifts in emotion. They remember how something felt, not just what was said. They're the ones who can tell when someone is slightly off, even if nothing obvious is wrong. Their attention goes deeper, but narrower. It locks onto meaning and lets go of labels. And in a world that rewards quick recall of names, that kind of mind gets mislabeled as careless. But look closer. Who would you rather talk to? someone who remembers your name but forgets everything you said 5 minutes later, or someone who forgets your name but remembers the exact moment you opened up about something real. That question makes people uncomfortable because the obvious answer doesn't match the rule we've all been following. And this is where you have a choice. You can keep measuring yourself by a standard that only captures surface-level memory, or you can recognize that your mind is optimized for something else entirely, something quieter, less visible, but often more meaningful. This doesn't mean names don't matter. They do. Socially, they always will. But they are not the full measure of attention. Not even close. They're just the easiest thing to check. So when you reduce your self-worth to whether or not you remembered a name, you're ignoring everything else your brain successfully held onto, the parts that actually define connection. And maybe the real problem isn't that you forget names. Maybe it's that you've been judging your entire way of perceiving people through the smallest, least meaningful detail about them. So here it is. You have two options. You can say yes and accept that your brain prioritizes depth over labels, that it's wired to remember what actually matters, even if it misses what's expected. Or you can say no and keep forcing yourself into a standard that was never designed for how you naturally think. But you can't do both.